Okay, so it's my great honor to coordinate this panel. And my name is Heng, and I'm from Kogar School of Business, American University in Washington, D.C. And I have been in the phase where I'm refocusing or retransitioning. I spent the first 12 years of my career at Penn State College of Information Science and Technology, kind of starting my career in information science. And I also got to know many wonderful colleagues working in the cyber field, and the CCS community was also one of my reference, field I often read the papers from and try to study or keep studying about cybersecurity. So starting from the year of 2018, I switched my focus. I joined the Kogar School of Business and become a business professor. And in that capacity, I try to bridge the gap between what we call theory and practice, or in other words, academic research versus what we call engineering or practical implication or transitional research. I reach out to the business leaders, policy decision makers, and try to fill the knowledge gap between what we are doing in the research community, scientific community, versus what the practitioners like CEOs or CIOs, they need to know about cybersecurity. This has been exciting. I learned a lot from practitioners. So it's kind of give me some more interesting perspective. So for today's panel, I also have some questions to ask our distinguished panelists. And the very first person I would like to call to bring your attention is Weihang. Weihang is now an assistant professor at University of Buffalo. Before joining Buffalo, she received her PhD degree in computer science from Purdue University in the year of 2018. She was awarded an NSF Career Award in the Best Chair in the year of 2021. Congratulations. And has a Facebook Testing Verification Research Award in 2019 and Mozilla Research Award in 2019. And so very successful research awards and grants. And welcome, Weihang. And we would like to hear a little bit about what you are doing, what you are up to.
Thank you. Yes. Okay. So yeah, hello everyone. My name is Weihang Wang. I'm assistant professor at University of Buffalo. And first, I want to thank all the organizers to giving me this opportunity to meet everyone. Okay, so before joining University of Buffalo, I was a PhD student at Purdue University. And my research interests are software testing, computer systems, and software security. And some of the projects I have been recently working on, including obfuscating JavaScript malware and investigating the compiler optimizations and detecting web-based cryptojacking attacks. And among today's panelists, I believe I have the least experience as a mentor. And but yeah, I'm very honored to and willing to share any of my mentoring and research experiences. And also, I'm very happy to have this opportunity to learn from other panelists and also the audience. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So our second panelist, I'm curious, or I try to invite to speak to all of us, is Bhavani. And I think I can spend the whole hour to read Bhavani's achievement and bio and very successful career. And I mean, instead of doing that, I'm going to give a very short introduction. And then we'll have a lot of questions. I mean, I am very curious about learning from you. I think you have a very unique 40-year career development experience so far, as faculty, very successful researcher, faculty members with commercial computer industry background experience and federal funded research and development center program directors in the government agencies. So from my perspective, it seems to me that you had everything and you can do everything so well. right? So to me, I have always been a university professor setting. I have been always thinking about what it will look like if I work for the industry. If I, work for a commercial computer industry or IT related field. So you have been having all we want, we try to achieve. And we really look forward to you in terms of sharing your combination of experience, how you can switch and navigating the different challenges and different sets of expectations, from commercial part of the world, from the engineering part of the world, from the fundamental research part of the world, from, program management part of the roles. So welcome, Bhavani, and thank you so much to be part of this panel.
Thank you so much, Heng, for that wonderful introduction. So I'm going to tell you the sort of the pros and cons for having this varied sort of career. It was in a way not by choice. I always wanted to be a professor, but as I said, when I didn't accept the tenure track position back in 1980, because as I said, my son was a baby, and then I took visiting faculty positions, and then I worked in the commercial industry, federal research and NSF, and finally came to academia. But there are a lot of positives for having a varied career because you really understand different types of work, right? What you need to do in commercial industry, what's expected at MITRE Corporation, and then National Science Foundation and academia. So one of the things with the commercial industry and also even MITRE, because even though MITRE is a federally funded research and development center, we have our customers and our sponsors. So we really need to, I think one of the things, if you want to have a career in the business world, you really need to understand the business. And so a lot of the research is sort of directed towards customer specific research, right? In most companies, I mean, right, once upon a time, like IBM Almaden and IBM TJ Watson, AT&T, Bell Labs, even DEC Labs, they were really very much sort of, I would say, more fundamental research. But now things are changing. And so you really need to focus on customer specific, business specific research. Even at MITRE, that's what I learned. So I always think about the business. And then NSF was like a transition and then getting into academia, where although some projects are business oriented, but mostly it's more fundamental research. And so it's just varied. So you have different perspectives. So that's the plus side. Now, on the other hand, when you have sort of a varied career, because I was in the commercial industry 6 years, and then MITRE Corporation 13 years, and then NSF 3 years, and now academia 17 years. So you are not sort of in one place for a very long time, although I've had some long career at MITRE and academia. So if you want to sort of really delve in, or especially if you're in academia, if you want to get management positions and so on, it becomes harder. It's better to start when you are younger, right? When you talk about research, it doesn't really matter as much, because if you can do good research, you can do it in companies as well as in academia. But again, if you want to go into those management positions, I always tell like women and minority communities, if you're good in management, you really want to focus on being department head, being dean, and so on. Only if you have 10 female out of 10 department heads, you need to have at least 5 female, then you have a chance of becoming a dean. So from that point of view, I think it's a bit of a handicap because you haven't stayed in one place for a long time, you see. So there are pros and cons. So a lot of variety, and you understand different perspectives, that's the plus. But again, if you want to go up the management chain and so on, it might be, so it may not be a plus. So you want to really decide what you want to do. So that's really what I wanted to say.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Later we will have a lot of questions about that, because you had it all, and you are having all these aspects and experience so successful. So next, our third panelist is Behnaz. Behnaz is now a senior researcher at Oracle Labs, Australia. And she graduated from, she got her PhD from National University of Singapore School of Computing. And Behnaz, I want to share with you that I also got my PhD from School of Computing at National University of Singapore back to the year of 2006. Very nice to see you here to make that connection. So would you like to speak a few words about yourself and what you're up to?
Yes, sure. Well, I was recently promoted to principal researcher, which was great, at Oracle Labs. So I basically was introduced to security and got interested when I was a teenager back in the high school. And my initial explorations and just playing around with the tools and reading books really motivated me to do computer science. So I did my undergrad back in Iran. I'm originally from Iran, and my undergrad thesis was about basically extending SE Linux to basically for temporal role-based access control. And that gave me the opportunity, that basically thesis gave me the opportunity to be accepted for basically PhD and get a scholarship at NUS. And I focused mostly during my PhD on characterizing and detecting vulnerabilities in Android applications. I did an internship at Oracle Labs in Australia, basically during my PhD to basically come up with an analysis that would scale to JDK, which is massive. And it was pretty interesting and cool. And that basically was another doorstep to come back to Australia after graduating and joining the labs as a permanent researcher. And since then, I've worked on various types of analysis tools to detect vulnerabilities in applications. And the one cool thing was that when I joined, I started a project, and that project really went well. And basically, it's about finding vulnerabilities in web applications. And we managed to productize our tool, and now basically employees around Oracle are using it every day. And it's really great to see how a research idea can, become usable and useful to people in your career. So yeah, so that's where I am at the moment. And I just to give you an idea of my other interests, I'm deeply passionate about human beings in general, how we basically work, how we develop habits at work, why some people are so easy to collaborate with and some people are not. And in general, I really like to see my research as an art and just create beauty out of it every day. Yeah, so that's me.
Thank you so much, and thank you for participating in this panel. And last but not least, Elisa, and one of our senior scholars on this panel. And I never shared this with you, Elisa, about how I got to know your research back to the year of 2001 when I first joined National University of Singapore School of Computing as a graduate student. I think back then in the what we call new graduate student, new PhD student orientation. We were, I think back then when a few of the very senior database researchers and professors at the School of Computing actually incentivized with the they incentivize to study hard. And by providing you, spelling out your name in a new PhD student orientation, saying that whomever who are the top 10, PhD students in your cohort will be rewarded with PhD fellowship, fully sponsored fellowship to be the exchange student and to have the opportunity to work with Elisa. So you probably don't know that part of the history, but back then when I received my PhD student orientation, your name was spelled out as one of the distinguished professors who may work with the top 10% of our cohort back then. So it's great, my honor to make this connection here today officially. And yeah, let's have you to introduce yourself a little bit to our panel. Oh, Elisa, it seems that you're still muted.
Hello to everyone. I'm very happy to be here and be part of this exciting panel. So I am a professor of computer science since I have been at Purdue since 2004. And before that, I was a professor at the University of Milan in Italy, where I was also the head of the department, a very large department with more than 60 professors. And before that, I was at the University of Genova, again in Italy. That was the first when I just started as professor. I was lucky actually that I became professor when I was 33 years old and directly professor, didn't have to be assistant professor, associate professor. And before that, I was in a research institution in Italy, in Pisa, where I studied. So, and then, during my various years, I've been a postdoc at IBM in 92, in 1983. Then again at IBM in San Jose, Almaden, now the lab is in Almaden in 1984, at MCC in Texas again. So I was going back and forth. And also, I would like to mention that I've been twice in sabbatical in Singapore. For some reason, I always go Singapore for my sabbatical. So the first one was at the NUS, because I have a lot of connection with the Professor Benchinui. And we wrote the papers together, so I knew a lot of faculty. The last time I went to the SMU, Singapore Management University, which is downtown in Singapore. And the reason why I moved to the US was, it's not that I really wanted to see how it would be a professor in the US, but Purdue, they actually contacted me and asked whether I wanted to, was interested in getting a position at Purdue. And Purdue was very strong in cybersecurity. That's why I decided, let me jump the ocean and move to the US. Usually people in my position in Italy don't do this because getting a professor position in Italy is very difficult. And nobody, once they reach such a position, nobody would quit it, but I did. And I was very happy because I found a changing environment, meeting different people, being in a different country is very, really, I broadened my research quite a lot. Also, I want to mention, my research area was really in databases when I started. That's how I knew many professors in Singapore because in NUS, because they have a strong database group. So, but then slowly, I moved more and more towards security. And even though my emphasis has been a lot on data security the last 4 years, I've been working on cellular network security. So I keep kind of expanding and changing a bit my research. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So now I think we are on our scheduled time. It's perfect timing for us to start our discussion. And I will first throw out several questions, probably maybe in a fun way, and talk about, our graduate school experience. For Elisa and Bhavani, it might be very, many years ago, but I would like to maybe start with Weihang and Behnaz about your first and second year graduate school experience, and then we will ask Bhavani and Elisa to also share their graduate school experience. I bet that there will be cultural norm differences because that's a different phase, right? The different time, different era of computer science development. So the whole research, R&D, I bet the culture might be different, but I'm very curious. So let's talk about two of our recent PhD graduates who successfully become, one become principal researcher, scientist in Oracle, and then Weihang in academia. So Weihang, how about your first and second year graduate school experience? What was that like?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I like this question. So so research-wise, I think during my early years in PhD, I was struggled quite a little bit about what research directions I should pursue. So initially, I wanted to work on some networking research, partially because before joining PhD, I got a master's degree in China. And during that time, I worked a bit on networking research. And after I started a PhD, I spent a lot of time, but I couldn't find out what exact research problem in this field I want to work on. So I think one of the reasons is because my prior experience was limited. I did not have enough knowledge for me to find a good research problem. And the other thing is I simply don't know what is a good research problem and how to find one. And yeah, I think we can talk about this, in the next round. And beyond the research and from this everyday life's perspective, because I was an international student, and so coming to the US for the PhD study was quite exciting, and everything was fresh for me. So yeah, that's all from me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Behnaz.
Yeah, so similar experience. I was an immigrant from Iran going to Singapore, and I think I went through a massive culture shock in the beginning. And everything was both exciting and terrifying at the same time for me. At the same time, I also had to do research, and we had a lot of coursework to do as well during our PhD program. I remember I was also feeling a lot like an imposter, basically thinking, oh, it should have been a mistake. I shouldn't have been accepted to this school. And basically that had a consequence. So I thought at that point I had a professor being assigned to my basically PhD program, and I did not really have the courage to explore other professors' works and see what else is possible. And I was just so scared, and I felt like, oh, I might lose the opportunity. So that resulted in doing basically working on a topic for 2 years, which was quite successful, but I really felt uncomfortable with that. And it was only after 2 years and passing my qualification exams that I thought, no, that's not going to work for me. And I started from scratch, completely switching topics. So this was my first 2 years.
Wow, I actually hear about some keywords from both of you. You had doubts, you had struggles, you had frustrations, you had some fear, you had imposter, and kind of somehow exploring topics, ended up with switching topics. Thank you for sharing that. And to be very frank with you, these keywords actually exactly summarize my first and second year experience, which back then I felt at the end of my second year, I almost concluded that I was not fit with a PhD. I was very close to say, maybe I should just do a master's and conclude everything. And back then we don't have events like this, right? So I thought it's just me. I am failing. I didn't realize that PhD itself is a journey of exploration, is a journey of asking all the questions, it's a journey of learning independent thinking and independent research. So I think as of today, these kind of opportunities are so helpful. So now let's turn to Bhavani and Elisa. What was your first and second year, looking like? Is it because, the time stamp are so different that you may not suffer from, or you may not have these list of keywords to summarize your first and second year graduate school experience? So Bhavani.
Yeah, so again, it was like ancient, right? So I started my graduate work, it was in the UK, in England, That was in 1975. I was 20 years old, just got married. So I had to cope with a marriage, arranged marriage. So I didn't know my husband very well. So I had to cope with the marriage and I had to cope. So in the British system, you start your first year with a master's, all the courses that you take. And then you get the master's and then you go on for the PhD for the next 3 years, three and a half years. So first 1.5 years is with your master's. The other 3 years is with your PhD, the PhD program. So here I am. Oh, okay. And another thing, when we talk about 1975 and in England, my husband had just finished his PhD at Cambridge and he got a postdoctoral position in Bristol. And so I was also limited to that particular university. And then they have master's programs very fixed. So mathematical logic. And I didn't know anything about it. So I really had to study, which has really helped me a lot. And then in the first half of the year, I was so anxious. I felt that I was not mastering it, and I was sort of struggling. And then suddenly it all came together for me. I began to understand, and so I did quite well actually in the exams, and then in my thesis, and then similarly PhD. I wanted to focus on complexity and computability theory. I wanted to go more into computer science rather than staying in logic. And so back and forth, I was with my advisor, and then we decided on a problem together. We were looking at different problems, and together we came up with this problem. And again, the first 6, 7 months, 8 months, I was not making any headway. I was sort of struggling with the research problem, reading various papers and unable to make progress. And he was sort of getting a little bit disappointed. But then again, suddenly everything came together. Also for the PhD, I was able to prove lots of theorems, complexity results. It all came very naturally after that. So both master's and PhD throughout that. In the beginning, I was struggling, right? For the master's, first 5, 6 months, and I was kind of crying. And then the last 7, 8 months, it all came together. And for the PhD, it was more like the first 8, 9 months. I was struggling, and then it all came together. So that's why I tell everyone, never give up, because it's all going to come together if you really work hard and you are confident. So that's one thing even my husband says that sometimes I'm so overconfident. I think like everything can be done, but you have to have that belief. Otherwise you can just, you can get so depressed. I never allowed to get to myself. I said, no, I can do it. I can do it. All the time I will say that to myself, and then I did it. So that's how you got to be. I hope that helps. But again, this is a very long time. But even though it was 45 years ago, I think the challenges are more or less still the same, in the sense that, you have to tackle this problem, research problems. Sometimes you have very bad days, sometimes you get stuck, but you've got to have that belief. That's important. Never give up.
Thank you. Elisa?
Yeah, actually, my situation was very nice because we had a lot of female students at my time when I was a student. Because for some reason, a lot of women were taking computer science in Italy. And so basically, I still remember that often when we have, I remember we had some very difficult theoretical project on computability theory. They would give you some theory problem and give a week to solve it. And we were a team, because they were done in groups of only 5 women. But they were so good that we did better than everyone else. And there was another group of all the men students who were struggling with this assignment. So we give them one of our solutions, not the best. We had come up with 3 different solutions, and we took pity of those guys and give them one, okay? So that was very nice. And also, I must say, I had a very high GPA. But in any case, when I was looking for a professor to work with, I wanted to study more computability theory, because at my time, it was a lot of theory. We had a very good professor in logic and computability theory. And we had to study very long courses with oral examination, written, But this professor told me, oh, Miss Bertino, I'm moving to Paris. I'm leaving the University of Pisa. I said, well, okay. Then I went to another one. I was a professor of complexity. He told me, no, I have already too many students. And then, of course, I was a little bit, you know, I have to find a professor, I have a topic, because I want to graduate quickly. But then, fortunately, found a database professor who told me, okay, I have a room for a student. But then basically he left me on my own, and this was very good for me because I learned to rely on myself, come up with my problem, the solutions, everything. So I kept working. I realized that, you know, you really have to, you know, be confident and don't expect the other people, you know, will give you all the ideas and things. But because of that, what I do very hard with students, I try to understand each student. Some students have very good ideas already, some they don't. And then I put them in projects where they can work on some little problem and branch out from there. Because every person is different. So I don't want to have a student just left by himself or herself to look for a problem. I want really to help them in the best way that fits their personality, because each person is different. So.
Yeah. Thank you so much. These actually, you know, we did enough ice-breaking kind of exercise, and hope everyone is warming up, and I'm still waiting for your questions. And I have another set of questions that actually perfectly link from our graduate school experience to some specific research related questions. For example, how to choose research topics, you know, in graduate school, and what problems to work on. And correlated with that is another set of challenge, right? Once you make a decision on, you know, work on a set of research topics, either by, you know, your own inspiration, your own ideas, or sometimes graduate students often started working on a set of problems that your professors, your mentors, your advisors assign to you if you are working as a research assistant on their projects and so on. So there are these decisions to be, you know, that you made, and then you decided to work on their problems, like say for 6 months. And then you started submitting papers. And sometimes you know, it's not always, we always are lucky that our first time of submissions are always being accepted. And I think statistically, for a lot of graduate students or the young scholars, for most of the times of their first time submission, it often ended up with rejections, right? So another correlated question I want our panelists to answer together is that, you know, once you make your decision on your topics and then you invest your time and effort working very hard on that for extended period of time, and sometimes you ended up with, you know, a set of challenges or failures, and sometimes these things didn't go as you imagined. You know, so sometimes the system's too slow, the you know, rejected papers, and if you put proposals together, and also sometimes collaboration didn't go well as you would expect it. So a set of these problems or issues may gradually emerge as you started working on the topics and the problems. And there are different types of failures, and sometimes some failures or mistakes we make are necessary steps that will ultimately lead to success or paper acceptance or, you know, proposal acceptance, for example. But there is probably another type of failure or rejections. Sometimes they're sending the signal that maybe the directions was not right. Maybe you should, you know, redirect and refocus on some of the problems you started, you know, at the very beginning, right? So my question to all of our panelists is that first, you know, how you decide on what kind of topics or problems to work on, and second is that when you receive these so-called failure signals, how to differentiate which are constructive and necessary steps that will ultimately lead to success, which means that even you get the rejection signal, you still continue working on that, improving on that. But then there might be other sets of signals saying that the direction I took might be wrong, right? How to differentiate these different types of not going so well signals? Okay, so these are kind of interconnected questions. Feel free to just jumping on how to choose research topic, or how to deal with these failures, or how to differentiate the different types of so-called failure signals. Weihang, do you want to be the first one to share your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. So in terms of research topics, yeah, as I said initially, I was struggled quite a bit. And at the end of my second year of my PhD study, I went to an internship in a startup company in California. And during that internship, I developed an internal software release tool for that company using JavaScript. And I realized that developing web applications using the JavaScript projects and frameworks are much more complex than I thought. So I feel a lot of constraints in terms of debugging, analyzing, and understanding JavaScript programs as a developer. And after that internship, I wanted to focus on program analysis for web applications. And regarding the concrete research problems and projects, yeah, during my PhD, honestly, the idea of my first project was given by my PhD advisor. And that project was closely related to one of my senior lab mates. And after that, later on, when I tried to develop my own ideas, so I read research papers and articles to get some inspiration, but lots of the time, those ideas may be very preliminary or have already been published by others. Then I would keep looking and investigate more deeper. For example, I may work on some examples manually to testify the idea, verify the assumptions, or get some hands-on experience to refine those ideas. And I may also talk with others and get feedback, including other actually PhD students. And a lot of times I find myself later on work on a research problem quite different from the initial idea. So this is because sometimes those initial ideas have limitations, or the problem doesn't have the fundamental challenges, and I have to go to the other direction. And as time goes, so sometimes the problem may become more interesting one than I initially planned. And beside those experiences, so because of today, I believe majority of the audience are students. So I would suggest the students to suggest a student train to be more sensitive on research ideas, because when we start to work on these actual problems and play with this system software, you will realize that what pieces are missing and what components have the room for improvement. And also take notes for these ideas because you may not always have the time and bandwidth for what you want to do immediately, and you may want to revisit those ideas later on. So in terms of actually handling these rejections and if the research project doesn't go well, so I think during the PhD, I think this is a part of the academic life, and it is very frustrating and difficult, and but I think we should just always have the belief that the good work eventually will be published somewhere. But yeah, it was very difficult. And in terms of changing direction, I think for most of my work, I didn't completely give up, as it's also a difficult decision to give up on a project if you have already spent a lot of effort. And yeah, but there are definitely some projects maybe more interesting and more promising. But yeah, I think right. I think that's all from me. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. How about Behnaz?
Yeah, so excellent questions. I think for the first part of the question, which was about how to choose a topic. So as I said, I had actually completely changed my topic during my PhD. And I think what really, at that point, I had no clue why and how I could do it. But for some reason, I was really listening to myself and seeing what really motivates me and energizes me. And the first topic was not. And it was basically similar to Wei, I can't pronounce her name, sorry, correctly, but like it was, the topic was handed to me from my professor, which was a follow-up on a senior student. I think so over the years, I think I have learned a lot from the people that I have worked with, and I definitely would take a very different approach if I wanted to start my PhD again. The first thing I would say is that see really what ignites you, what really makes you want to solve a problem. So very simple. You pick some papers and see which papers make you fall asleep and which papers really might want you to wake up early in the morning and solve the challenge or know more about the problem. Because we will face a lot of problems during our PhD. And by definition, research is about uncertainty. We don't know what is going to happen. So we should have a really good, a good engine to drive us through the journey. And I think basically Radia was a perfect example. Her journey, how she started her PhD, she actually was really interested in solving a problem, and that's why she went to the graduate school, was a perfect example. For the second part of the question, well, as I said, there will be a lot of problems on the way. One thing that now I have learned over time and now I'm using as a tool for myself is to simply think that everyone wants to champion me. Everyone wants basically to help me out to succeed. Even the reviewer who is giving me, not a very pleasant review, right? That way of thinking just puts aside a lot of stress and basically negative thought in my head that basically stops me from making progress. And the second thing is that I try truly to think as a scientist, which means that I'm not anymore Behnaz, I'm a scientist, and I will detach myself from my problem, from my project, from my solution, and really listen what the reviewers are telling me or what my colleague is telling me. And that helps me to rethink the problem. Maybe they have a very smart idea for me that if I listen carefully, I can just, twist the problem a little bit, and I can make a lot of progress in focusing on a different aspect of the problem. So I think it's very important not to confuse basically our work with our personality and make it a personal thing. It's really like a project that we are trying to work at and a problem that we are going to solve and contribute to the world. That would be my basically thoughts.
Thank you. Bhavani and Elisa?
Yeah, so that's excellent. I'm glad you asked the question because it really made me think. Now, if I had taken that job at New Mexico Tech when they offered me the tenure track, I think my career would have been completely different because I would have been focusing on theory of computation, computability theory, because the first 2-3 years, I was really focusing on that research. And I published like 8 journal papers, all top tier, a couple of them in Journal of Computer and System Sciences, some in Notre Dame Journal of Formal Logic, Theory of Computation. So I was, as a visiting faculty, I was working in theory, but then you also have to get a job, right? So I was following my husband for quite a while in the early years. And so now here we are in, so I was first worked as a developer for a couple of years at Control Data in developing network systems, Control Data Corporation. It was one of the top 3 after IBM and DEC came Control Data, the largest computer company. But while I was doing that, I felt that working in theory wouldn't really help me. So I was an adjunct faculty at University of Minnesota. So I did some joint work with some professors, White-Xi, and then we published some papers in distributed systems, which also helped me in my work. And so in IEEE transactions and software engineering. So that was sort of a couple of years. Then I joined Honeywell in 1985. And that's when I got into database security. So since then, I've been focusing on database security, but again, it's what your sponsors want, right? Who is paying for your research? And so at Honeywell, I was working on one of the early high assurance multi-level secure database systems. And so I started, I was doing research in that area and developing a multi-level relational data model and securing query processing algorithms, transaction management algorithms. And so we also started publishing in IEEE TKDE and some of the other good journals. And then when I went to MITRE, it all depends on projects. So when you are in industry, right, it's even MITRE, you don't have the luxury of working on the problems that you want. So whoever is funding you, so I was working on 3 or 4 projects: secure object-oriented systems, secure distributed systems, inference problem. And so those were my projects, and I published, and a lot of my papers were single author papers. Some implementation, I worked with some of those people who helped me. So my early work was mostly single author papers. And then so that was my work in Honeywell. And sorry, at MITRE Corporation, right? And then I sort of went into management, and then I was also doing some work in data mining, and I was publishing some papers in that area there more with my colleagues. And then NSF, of course, you're a program director. Then that time I got into semantic web. And then the last 17 years, I've been able to focus more, doing some work in semantic web and security and machine learning and security. So what I'm trying to say for those of you all, right, you can't really, the lesson here is you can't really fix. Of course, if you are in academia, it's a different matter. But if you are in industry and again, doing industry research, you've got to work on problems that are of importance to the company. So you've got to be flexible, right? That is really the message I'm giving. Of course, if you're in academia, that's a different story. As I said, if I had been in academia starting in 1980, I probably would be still, because I really enjoyed working in theory. But you've got to be flexible because you also have the real world and real life to think about, right? So I've sort of evolved over the years, and I look at some interesting things that excite me now. Like I want to get into sort of IoT security and look at it, right? That's sort of my next area I want to, I've done a little bit of work in that. So again, my research has evolved depending on, the company I'm working for or the research lab I'm working for. So it has evolved and we have to be flexible. So that's my message. And about disappointments, a lot of papers I've had rejections. And I think, was it Behnaz, right? She said, okay, first of all, you can't get discouraged. So there's very little that really, even proposals get rejected or papers. I get a bit unhappy for a couple of hours, then I go and sleep, which is fortunately I can sleep very well. Next morning is a different day for me. So that if I'm upset, my solution to being upset is sleeping. And then the next morning I wake up bright and cheery, look at the comments and work on them and address them. And so it doesn't even matter, when my papers are rejected. But in the early years, I was a little bit bothered. But again, I sleep. The next day I get up. And as Behnaz said, really look at the comments, because the comments, most of the times the comments are quite good. Although these days we just get some horrible comments like, oh, there's nothing original in this paper. That's really ridiculous when they give comments like that. So again, the second point, be flexible. My second point is never give up. You've got to persist. So that's sort of my answer. It's a good thing that you asked this question. It made me think.
Okay, so for me, I must say, when I was 23 years old, I realized that finding a good research idea was a critical problem. It was not trivial. That's, if I say, okay, in my life, I want to have more research problems and ideas, then I can work on. So that is a nice situation to have. You have a lot of ideas. Okay, so that was my very early realization of what was. Then my way of operating was the following. Because as with Bhavani, I was in a research institute by the Italian government where we had funded the project by the European Union. So we had to work on those projects. So my agenda was to have my own little research on myself. So I had the papers alone. But then I was working in those projects, always tried to get ideas from the other people because I learned a lot from other people. So I was trying to embrace those ideas. I never wanted these other people to convince them on my own idea. I said, okay, I'll do my research. I don't care what the other thing, but I try instead to learn from them. Then in this way, I could broaden my research. For example, at a certain point, we had a project on object-oriented distributed systems. I ended up learning and writing papers in top object-oriented conference like UPSALA and the COOP on type systems, just because what I also do, once I get on a topic, I want to have a stream of papers. Okay, it's not that I just, because, so that's my way of, so over the years, I expanded in this way. Then somebody very senior in 1984 gave me a very good suggestion. Not me, you always have to look at where hardware goes, where the technology goes, because in software may depend on the hardware. So carefully always look at technology. Okay, and that's, for example, something which I found very useful more recently when I started working in IoT systems, probably 6-7 years ago. And in networking, because I realized that about 5 years ago that there is a lot of work to do in networks, especially cellular networks. That is extremely important. For example, now I believe robotics, people in computer science should get much more into robotics because with AI, there will be a lot of work for us to do on those robots. This may be difficult for a PhD student in computer science because they don't know much about hardware. A lot of students may think that robotics is mainly mechanical engineer. No, it will be software increasingly. So that's what you have to do, okay? And especially in networking, there are all those space terrestrial integrated networks, the softwareization of network. A lot of software companies are getting inside of network for this reason. Now, about papers being rejected, I must say I was lucky because when I was trying to publish a lot, because I wanted to become a professor in Italy, the Italian selection committees for professors, we are talking about the end of the 80s, they didn't care about conferences. So there wasn't no such low emphasis. They wanted to see papers in top journals like Todd's, TKD, TDC. So fortunately, because of that, I didn't have a lot of rejection because the journals, you revise the paper. So that was really nice. But in general, my attitude with everything is that, okay, you look at the reviews, half of them are wrong, okay? And I think, okay, it's my fault I didn't present. That's what I tell the students, okay? I tell them, just next time we will present better. Then looking about my colleagues, they submitted 2-3 times, sooner or later those papers get accepted. And half of the comments give you good suggestions, good ideas, you resubmit, and even if with the proposals, a couple of years, all my proposals got rejected. This year I got refunded by NSF, so that's life. But to be honest, it's very important to learn from failure because probably you did something wrong. Sometimes it's just that you were unlucky, you find a nasty reviewer who didn't understand your paper, still wanted to reject it. But, that's life. I mean, it's not.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Elisa, for mentioning that dealing with rejection is just part of our life. I yes, I totally can relate that.
To be honest, I think it's part of life of everyone. I mean, every human being probably it's not only us who are particularly not being rejected, right? Let's be optimistic, you know.
Yeah, and I can tell you that I work at an NSF for 3 years as program directors, and even program directors has to deal with rejections on a daily basis. It's the rejection to the program directors, panelist invitation, right? Everyone is busy. Sometimes, program directors are actually sometimes feel frustrated in terms of not being able to receive so many positive responses in terms of their invitation.
I can say something on that. One of the program directors said that one person from a top university, when she asked this other person to be on the panelist, don't bother me with such emails. So that happens to program directors.
Sometimes I must say what I don't like in general, people being arrogant. Because even if you are very good, you should be kinder to the other people.
Yes.
So I am happy to tell you that now I received based on my count, I received 12 questions in the chat, and most of them are to me. Directly, and I assume that whenever people read the question to me directly, I assume that I will protect your anonymity. So I will read this question, but without spelling your names. So the very first question, I want a quick response from Bhavani. This is question directed to you, that what are the pros and cons of working in the industry as a researcher versus being in academia?
Right, so that's a good question. And this panel has really made me think. One thing with academia, you have the freedom for research. Remember, I said that if I had been in academia as early as 1980, I would have still been working very lightly. You never know about the future and on the problems that I really want to work. But when you are in industry, you've got to sort of shift gears in the sense you work on problems that the company is interested, or some industry you have to work on government contracts. And so whatever your grant or contract says you have to do. But the advantage is that you can see your projects being applied, right? So when I was at Honeywell, I worked on integrating multiple heterogeneous databases. And then we did a lot of demonstrations you have to show. So we demonstrated that system to Honeywell's residential controls division. And so they picked it up and integrated all of their data. Similarly, we developed an expert system for process control systems. It was a prototype. We went and showed it to the Honeywell's industrial automation division, and they picked it up and then adapted it to work in their plant. And then similarly at MITRE, we had to develop, integrating multiple database systems and incorporate security into it. And so we demonstrated that to the Army. Army funded us. We demonstrated that system to the Army, and then they were very interested, and they transferred some of the technology into Honeywell's, Army's, it's called maneuver control system. And one other thing, like AWACS, I worked on next generation AWACS, distributed real-time systems and security. The AWACS program, the Air Force and Lockheed Martin and Boeing, they were interested. And so they took some of our work and incorporated. So you see your research being actually applied. And that could be really very rewarding, right? Whereas in academia, you have it's the luxury of having your own, you can work on whatever you want. Even if you don't get funding for a particular area, you can always have a couple of TAs, or you are assigned a TA, you can get 1 or 2 students to work with you, and you can pretty much work on what you really want to work on. So that's another advantage. So it's the pros and cons. No situation is perfect. And it depends on what my advice again is maximize whatever you have in front of you, right? Because sometimes life doesn't work the way you want it to work, right? You have, spouse and children and whatever, it's always challenging. So you've got to be flexible, and you've got to work on, you've got to be flexible and take advantage of what's in front of you. And that's what I did. For most of the time, until I sort of got in full-time into academia. Even that, you have to always sort of integrate your professional with your personal life and so on. So then you have challenges. So again, take advantage of what you have.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And another question, which might be more sensitive, so I may just direct these questions to our senior scholars on the panel, since I think senior scholars have more to offer in terms of some more sensitive question. It's about, this person asking about how to handle professors' bullying behavior. I'm not so sure what we consider as bullying, but based on my own interpretation or imagination or the reading of the news, the bullying can be somehow, like showing not respect in a daily communication, for example, using F word in a daily email communication, or just call some junior scholar's idea as stupid. These, to my terminology, I broadly categorize these as bullying behavior as well. So to two of our most senior scholars on this panel, what are your advice to young scholars and students about how to deal with this bullying behavior, especially coming from more senior people in their life and work?
Do you want to answer, Elisa? And then I have my own version.
Again, to be honest, I don't have much experience because it never happened to me. Change a professor, you don't want to be with somebody who is that way. At least, and today I must say there is a lot of apart from this, there is a lot of awareness. There are female professors that somebody can go and talk to. So typically, I had an experience with the student, but the professor was not bullying. He wanted her to force to do some research that she didn't want. And she came and talked to me. I told her, okay, I'll talk to this professor, see whether you can come and work with me. So I told this professor, look, she, as a topics, prefers something else. And so I fixed the problem for her, and she actually did very, very well. So because in general, so you can have some support group or women that are counselors in universities, but today there is a lot of culture and there is awareness, to be honest.
So yeah, I would sort of agree what Elisa is saying. I haven't had anyone bully me, but as a professor, I have had students who have come to me because the professor they worked with, right, had, he or she, there has been a woman and a man, they have had some issues, not sort of harassment, but really making them, not creating a very pleasant environment. And so they have come to me and come to members of my team. And so we have taken these students. My one advice is, as Elisa says, change, but never never work with the person, because these professors are not going to change. If you are a bully, you are always a bully, unless something really drastic happens. So a bully is a bully. And so you stay with that bully, you will get into a very toxic situation. And that, and the professor has really the advantage in the sense that, he or she is a professor. So never get into a toxic situation because it might also affect your mental health. So change your advisor. That's my advice. It's like they say, right? You don't stay in a marriage in an abusive situation because it becomes toxic, right? You have to try and fix it, or you've got to leave. It's very similar also because a professor-student relationship is a sort of a fairly kind of a close relationship because you've got to be working with that person. And so if there's a bullying, then, leave toxic culture. No way. And the university doesn't support that, then you might even want to think about, leaving the university. But most universities, as Elisa says, now they are much more aware.
Thank you so much for both of you for the, very honest assessment and recommendations about to students to handle this situation, I can totally imagine that with students, you know, in a less powerful position in this situation, it might be very hard and challenging for them to even speak up for themselves, right? To find a trustworthy.
Yeah, add a comment because Daphne just send this in the chat to everyone. Daphne, you're right. But that case, I mean, it's very complicated case. But what happened also, what I realized that we have a environment where there are multiple cultures. You must be aware also of the difference in culture. In certain cultures, there is a much more hierarchical structure in society, and some of those professors may carry this with them. Okay, so as a student, you need to understand a little bit that perhaps for some professors from certain different culture, you never know, but they may still have a certain attitude. Okay. In general, I think, yeah, so that also, you know, helps in a way to know. And so you have also to understand, you know, at the end, if you don't feel well with this professor, can be, you know, the person is bad or is a different culture. And as Bhavani said, people don't change. Actually, the older people are, the worse, if they have some bad habit, the worse it becomes. Not to me and Bhavani, because we are very flexible and we improve with age, right, Bhavani? But yeah, but
okay.
I just wanted to add something here. I know I'm not a senior, but because I have also recently graduated and I have seen a lot of such stories. I think it's very easy for students to suddenly feel being victim and fall into this mindset of I'm a victim and I'm not capable of doing anything and just suffer through all the problems until the end. It happens a lot of the times. And some of my friends had really great ideas to break out of that mindset, and that was choosing some co-supervisors that they felt really you know, comfortable to work with, and that was actually a segue to get out and just you know, instead of just suffering through, to find a way out of the situation without also basically sometimes it's not so easy to completely, you know, change a supervisor at some point, or maybe the university is not completely supporting you. So this is another tip that might be useful for some people.
So thank you so much. Thank you so much for this topic. And I would like to, you know, just share that one of the our participants actually sent me a private message saying that I'm starting a master's degree in a cybersecurity lab, and with a very sad, you know, emoji. I just want to assure everyone that the negative events we talk about here are not the, you know, frequent happening events. These are just some less, you know, likelihood of events, very small chances of events. You know, this is academia, industry, research, or a company. It's just a small society, right? Each, we can see the reflection of the society. Bad things happen. Yeah, but we still need to stay positive, right? I still see a lot of good things happening. So I want to switch the gear a little bit, switch our lens a little bit, and back to the research again, back to our bright side of, you know, intellectual contribution. And this question I would like to direct to Weihang, since I'm mentioning that I have a list of, now I accumulated 15 questions. So let's see whether we can finish that on time. So Weihang, this is a question about topic selection in the research. And this person's mentioned, actually, this is a question to everyone. So I would just simply reading from the screen. It's typically recommended to select 1 or 2 venues related to your topic and visit them each year to establish your presence. So for interdisciplinary research, what is the trick to staying on top of the new literature and keeping up connections? Surely attending all the different conferences could take up way too much time, right? So what's your strategy in terms of keeping up the fast-growing literature?
Yeah, so yeah, I think reading papers is definitely great. However, I think just for the same reason as I mentioned, it would take a lot of time if keep tracking for all those papers in all the top venues. And I think another thing is it may be difficult to get a concrete research ideas, but just reading those papers. I would suggest that to look for a relatively focused area in cybersecurity. For example, even though I think, yeah, the area, right, like software security, cyber security, crypto, privacy, but yes, still this is a relatively big actually area, each of them. So I think, yeah, we can start to try some research ideas. That would be great. But I think the general advice is this process wouldn't be very fast. So should be patient and give yourself some time. And also, I think as Bhavani said, never give up. And yeah, just as I said, if this research idea is given by your mentor, advisor, that would be like maybe lucky. But yeah, if you need to investigate and to go through this process yourself, just yeah, give yourself a little bit more time to go through those process. Yeah.
Thank you, thank you. And another quick question directed to Behnaz. So this question is like, when you choose your research domain, do you consider that decision, right, together with your career path?
Sorry, I didn't hear the questions. Can you repeat?
Oh, sure. So this is the question about, when you started graduate school and starting to choose your research domain, did you consider that together with the type of career path? For example, are you going to be an industry, or are you going to become a faculty? Does that career path, your kind of initial kind of positioning yourself, whether you're industry researcher or engineer versus academic professors, will that affect your decision in graduate school in terms of what kind of research topic, what kind of research domain you should choose?
Yes, absolutely. And yes, so it was actually the case for me. So in the first 2 years, the topic that I did and I was not comfortable with, I just paused and I thought, what am I going to do with my life? Like, what is really the objective that I'm looking for after graduating from my PhD? And to me, it was very important to be part of the conversation in the world, to be working in industry and see, as Bhavani was saying, like my solutions being used by other people. That was something that really was important for me. So I chose my topic in a way that would be interesting also to industry. And it actually worked. I got lots of emails from industry to continue my PhD work in different ways. So yeah, I think it's quite important to really see what you want to do, maybe at least for a couple of years. Not you can never know. Still today, I don't know what I'm going to do like in 15 years, right? But at least for a couple of years, it's really great to think and imagine where you want to go and have a vision.
Great, thank you so much. And let me get to some other. There is a very interesting question I would like to rephrase a little bit because somehow I didn't quite get it, but this question gave me an idea. So in teaching about ethics, I don't know whether everyone is teaching ethics, there is a terminology or there is a method called teaching moment, which means that ethics could be so abstract if you only teach principles. You should identify those teachable moments, right, and putting students into that moment to make the decisions. And here is a similar thing I read from one of the questions directly, sent a private chat to me about our event here. This is also to the event organizer here and also our panelists here. People, our attendees find this is very useful, but it often happens only once a year. They are curious about whether this kind of event can be happening in a more frequently and maybe more real time, that, similar to that teachable moment. Is there any kind of a mentoring moment or, like an office hour session, right? Whenever bad things happening to students or our junior scholars who were frustrated about something, and then they can come to maybe the office hours of iMentor sessions here, right? You have a regular office hours, so they can schedule with one of our mentors and to ask them questions. So which means that how to make this or adapt this event or this type of mentoring to a relatively dynamic, real-time basis, or based on their needs when they're desperate need someone for advice. Do you have any questions? Yes, go ahead.
Can I answer that? I'm sorry. Great question. Because one of the things, and Daphne, Heng, Daphne, Elisa, we need to discuss is to have maybe some sort of I hate to say Facebook page or something for this iMentor, where people can ask questions and then maybe we can answer. Only one thing is that, these are things, when I answer, I will also make it a point. If I were you, this is what I will do. Because it's always, to give advice, and if something, is wrong, then if it doesn't work, then, there could be liability issues and so on. But my answer, somebody asked me a question the other day, I said, if I were you, this is what I will do, right? So maybe have some questions where people can have discussions. And I think that will help. And then next year, when we come for this meeting, then we will be even more prepared. So that's something that will be a good thing where, if they have something really urgent, then they can always come to, and talk about their challenges and issues. I don't know what the others think.
How about other panelists?
No, certainly, I think what Bhavani said is a really nice idea. In my view, though, for mentoring, I think, people don't have to think. So there are a lot of people that can help you, but different people can give you something different. So you must understand, what you can ask to whom. That's the way I always did. I don't want, because that's, you learn it in a different way, learn from more sources. That is very important. So, but I believe if we do what Bhavani suggested, it would be good to have a variety of people involved with different skills, expertise.
Yeah. But again, whenever you are given advice, the person who receives the advice has to balance everything and take the good points. So that's the challenge.
Bhavani, you know what happened? Sometimes I see people getting, conflicting advices.
Yes.
People have to understand that, they have to have the maturity to take their own decisions.
That's the thing.
They are not kids.
Yeah.
You really...
Can I add very quickly two things, Heng? One very thing with interdisciplinary research, there was a question, and I think Heng gave a very good answer. It's always good to work with another person in the other area, right? So we do a lot, and Elisa knows a lot on risk and so on. We work with, we are cybersecurity, data science, work with risk analysts like Alain Benzeswan, right? So it's always good to work with other people. And the question on bullying, although I was never bullied, when I was in academia, it's especially when you go as tenured professors, no one can really do anything to you. But when I was in the industry, and especially, even federal lab or whatever, there was a period, as I said, early to mid 90s. It was very hard. There was some other group, another person especially, who was so, I think must have been jealous, was so obsessed with what I was doing, was trying to derail me, but it was hard for me, but I always resolved and did twice as much and twice as well. And so that could have been something that could have broken me, but no, I really did so much. And that person, maybe I'm happy to say that, is nowhere now. And thanks to all the support I have from Elisa, Daphne, and everyone, I've done quite well. Okay. So, not as well as Elisa, but still I've done reasonably well. But that's the thing. So I just wanted to mention that.
Great. Thank you so much. And I still have a lot of questions, and it seems that we do not have time to really go through that.
To add one very, very small point. I just love when students randomly send email to me. I love the idea. I think it's great, no matter how big that researcher is and like how magnificent their work is. Study their work, find a point that is really interesting for you, and then send an email and see what happens for, ad hoc mentorship tips. You will be amazed how much people love that as well.
So
I like that idea.
Another question that you might want to ask, could you please provide some advice for young female researchers on how to develop the career in the early stage and how to pursue the senior position? You might want someone to answer that question.
So that is a question, and also together with a lot of private question, I think I group that as I want to ask the final round of the question to all the panelists. How do you define success, and how to help, the female scholars in a senior position? That's another definition of being success, about, being promoting to senior position, making sure that our tenure and promotion rates across gender, across race groups, are balanced in a way that we can achieve that. And I was told that we still have about 8 minutes. So can we have all the panelists, like starting maybe Bhavani, you talk about how we define success, how we help junior scholars to get there, how we help them, getting tenure, in academia, and if it's industry, getting promoted, and help each other. And and what does success mean to you and to all of us?
I'll answer very quickly. Success, there are 2 aspects, right? One is how you feel about yourself and how others perceive you. So if others think you are wonderful and inside you are miserable, that's not success. And if you think you are doing great and you are happy, but others are not perceiving you as well, that's sort of not success. Although it's better to be in that situation, that's not success either. So you've got to be happy with yourself, be happy with what you are doing, and at the same time, and do good work, and then others will recognize you slowly. So that to me is success. And second is the how to get more female researchers, right? Okay, tenure and promotion, of course, institute by institution, whatever the requirements, try to make sure that you accomplish all that, get the awards and career, and try your best. If you don't get career, that's not the end of the world. Try to compensate with something else. So you've got to come with a complete package. But more importantly, what I want to mention is that if you are good in management, or if you are good in something and if you want to do management, it's important for the junior researchers to get more into management if you are interested and if you are good at it, because only if we have female deans, right, the female dean can understand the female professors, and female dean could have female department heads. So at UT Dallas, we have a very good culture now. We got a female provost. She has hired 3 female deans, and our female dean has hired some female department heads. So they will then start supporting, hopefully, the female professors. So in the past, we just had, everyone was male, from the president to the provost to the deans, department heads, everyone in the engineering school. So we really want to, because only if 10 people are applying for the position, 9 men and 1 woman, 9 department heads men, 1 department head woman, who do you think will get the job as dean, right? Very likely, use probability, very likely that job will go to a man. So we need to have more people in positions of power to support women. So that for me is very, very important. So that's sort of, I try to, answer very sort of summary of what I believe.
Thank you. How about Elisa?
Yeah, somehow I must say, I would say what exactly Bhavani has said. So I share exactly what she said. In my view, in our job as a professor, also, success for me is also having very bright students that work with me, and they, then become excellent researchers in industry, in academia. That's for me, as an educator, is success. But other than that, I feel, happy to do what I do, be recognized, and, that I think is success. But one has to have his or her own goals. Okay, and success is reaching your goals.
Yeah.
Thank you. How about Weihang?
Yes. I think in terms of success, I think I would think that if from time to time I feel that I keep improving and I can do something better than I was previously, if I previously doesn't feel very comfortable with, and if I can become better on that thing. So I think I'm happy with that. And it's also good that to get a feedback from others, but sometimes I think also should actually feel like a less expectation, like from how others perceive about you. Yeah. And another thing is in terms of like a senior people like helping these junior researchers, I think actually for me, for example, this I'm invited by actually Daphne and other organizers to this panel. I think this is one good example of junior professors helping senior professor, senior helping junior, sorry. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's all from me.
Thank you. How about Behnaz?
I agree with all the answers, and I think something that I have stopped doing is to use the word success, because to me, success has a lot to do with competition. And in our community, in our research community, we are not going to compete with each other, but we are going to collaborate with each other and solve problems, right? So instead of success, I have started using the word mastery. And I really, every day, open my eyes and think, how can I get better at what I am today? Having a growth mindset instead of competing myself with others. And I think as a society, as like a systematic problem, we have to do a lot of unlearning of such topics. And we are just scratching the surface, and I'm very excited to see what happens, when we all start to rethink about such concepts like success.
Thank you so much. So to all our panelists, do you have any final wisdom to share with all our participants tonight?
It's just a wonderful panel. And again, I think the important thing is to feel good about ourselves and what we are doing. That's really important. And so that's something that, and get the mentor. Those are, I think all the panelists were just wonderful, different viewpoints, but very sort of synergistic ideas and comments. Yeah. And this has helped me a lot too. I've learned a lot in this panel.
I think we are approaching 8:05. Any other final word from
Heng, you're an excellent panel chair. I didn't know.
Yes.
You might be asked to do all the
great job.
Great job.
Yes. Thank you so much.
And also I want to share those participants who raised the question, but unfortunately, we have so many kind of interesting discussions ongoing. Unfortunately, I had not any opportunity to finish asking all the questions, but don't worry, I took notes and I took all the questions I received as private message. I saved the questions in my notebook, and I will, just save this question and pass it down to the next year's organizers without mentioning your names. I didn't save your name. Trust me, I'm a privacy researcher, so I know data anonymization. So this is a wonderful panel. I learned a lot. And regarding the final question, I remember that one of my, actually the very first thing in my career development, who gave me the greatest advice. And he actually mentioned to me that happiness should be the ultimate goal of what we're doing, no matter in work or life. I think that's the best advice that still applies to my life and work as of today. So I would like to share with that. Be happy, and we are a happy community here, and I look forward to next year's gathering like this and mentoring each other or just befriending with each other. Thank you so much.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Heng and our panelists. I'm glad that we end on such a high note.